while every day the media and our elected leaders talk about the Iran nuclear threat, the Chinese threat, and the North Korean threat, the experts know there are major threats coming from other nations and epicenters, and leading among those is Turkey.
And now, The Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Hello, I'm Edwin Black, investigative journalist, historian, and human rights author of 250 editions in 40 languages in 190 countries worldwide, including IBM and the Holocaust, War Against the Weak, and the Farhud, as well as many other books. Ours is a show for opinion makers and decision makers, not mass clicks. So if you think our show's content is meaningful, spread the word throughout your most informed networks. Subscribe for alerts at theedwinblackshow.com. And if you want to support our work, we certainly need your assistance. Please visit theedwinblackshow.com/support. Your help, big or small, assures our complete and utter intellectual and uncensored journalistic independence. Go to theedwinblackshow.com/support. And yes, I mean you. Today's episode is made possible and sponsored without any preconditions, requests, or stipulations by the very caring Stram family. These are people who care about our people. And it's co-sponsored by my latest, soon-to-be released book, Israel Strikes Iran, Operation Rising Lion, the 20-year backstory, which will be immediately available in a few days everywhere across the planet in hardback, paperback, ebook, audiobook editions, as well as a special commemorative gift edition offered only at Barnes & Noble. And it's co-sponsored by the just-released fourth edition of Ken Abramowitz's incisive best-selling book, The Multi-Front War, available everywhere across this planet in hardback, paperback, ebook, and audiobook editions, as well as a 5th anniversary commemorative edition only at Barnes & Noble. Plus, the ethics bestseller, Values That Shape the World, by our marvelous author, lecturer, friend, Faye Lincoln. If you'd like to honor someone with a sponsorship, contact us. That said, remember, I only speak for myself and for history, and the same goes for my guests. Today, we welcome viewers from across America, including our 4 watch parties in the villages, Newton, Mass., Chicago, and Tampa Bay. Overseas, I see viewers logged on from most of our usuals. Let's see, according to my private dashboard here, it's Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain, Canada, Germany, Holland, France, Italy, Spain once again, Poland, Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, large following in Panama, and Israel, plus other countries. If you have a question, place one short sentence in Zoom's QA feature. The Edwin Black Show, along with our YouTube site, speaks frankly and without tremor to a fragmented world seeking better understanding of our tormented past, our present very, very tense, and a turbulent future still uncertain. By the way, stay tuned for my special word of wisdom at the very end of the show, just before I sign off. So, before we dive into our timely show topic, the Turkish threat, let's cover some pressing topics of the moment. Our world is burning, and in so many places. Item 1, by the way, a new book is being released, Unveiled, Inside Iran's Woman, Life, Freedom, Revolt, written by the extraordinary Iranian-American journalist Jonathan Harounoff, who you may know as the press officer for Israel's UN ambassador, Danny Danon. Now, Johnny, you and I both know tensions are high in Iran, and that even as we speak, kinetic warfare may break out if Israel decides to attack Iran, as the media is suggesting. Tell us about the significance of this book at this time, why you wrote it, and why people must pick it up for themselves.
Thank you so much for having me on your brilliant show, Edwin, and great to be with you. Times are extremely tense right now, as you suggested. Israel has for years now cautioned the world that the Islamic Republic of Iran is on the brink of nuclear capability, and there's no peaceful outcome there. The regime does not have peaceful plans for this nuclear program, and it only wants to wreak havoc on Israel and also on its allies in the United States. Having said that, in addition to that, while so much of the media is focused on a potential war breaking out between these two countries and focusing on Iran's dangerous foreign policy, there's been much less attention placed on what's going on inside Iran, what's going on with the people of Iran, and drawing a very clear distinction between the peaceful, resilient, brave people of Iran and the regime that doesn't care about its own people. And this book that I spent 3 years writing as a journalist, Unveiled Inside Iran's Women Life Freedom Revolt, chronicles one particular episode, one particular uprising that almost brought the regime to its knees. And it occurred in September 2022 when a young Iranian Kurdish woman, Mahsa Jina Amini, was in Tehran with her relatives. And she was stopped the way many other young Iranian women were stopped by the country's morality police. And she was arrested for allegedly wearing her hijab too loosely. She was beaten, taken to a police detention center, fell into a coma and died. And her death, her murder, sparked a nationwide uprising because so many other women, mothers, girls, this resonated with them because it could have been them. They had also experienced a lot of this. This book talks about the origins of this momentous protest movement, its successes, and also it touches on its shortfalls because ultimately the regime was not toppled, but it was definitely shaken. And it was one of a number of uprisings that have taken place in the Islamic Republic's 46-year history.
Well, this is an extraordinary timing for you. As we all know, in the event that the Israel-Iran nuclear problem goes kinetic, militarily kinetic, there's a chance that the people will uprise and topple the mullah regime. What would people benefit from reading this book as things may unfold in the weeks to come?
This book will give you a sense of how throughout the Islamic Republic's brief but turbulent history, there have been specific moments in time, whether they're small moments or big moments, that have served as a trigger to the Iranian people to rise up, whether it was the disputed presidential election of 2009, known as the Green Movement, where the incumbent president, Ahmadinejad, was re-elected, even though he was by far not the favorite. And that triggered millions of people to take to the streets, and it was a very consequential uprising. Or the 2017 to 18 economic protests, the Women Life Freedom protests, or most recently, the nationwide trucker protests that have been that are carrying on as we speak, where ordinary Iranians from all over the country have been rising because they have come to the conclusion that their regime does not care about them. It cares more about investing hundreds of millions of dollars into building this web of terror proxies across the Middle East. It cares much more about developing a nuclear program and this dangerous foreign policy than improving the lives of everyday Iranians. And as we've seen throughout its history, the people rise because they've had enough, and they want a brighter, more prosperous future inside Iran.
Well, I'm glad you've explained it. And because you have explained it so well, it becomes obvious to me that if people want to understand the crisis in the Iranian popular movement and the Iranian public, this is a perfect book for them. Now, the book is going to be available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and worldwide, correct?
That's correct. It's available now for pre-order, and it will be released on September the 25th, 2025, which is just a week or so after the 3-year anniversary of Mahsa Amini's death.
All right, Johnny, thank you for sharing this with us. Good luck on the book. It's one we're going to be recommending.
Thank you so much, Edwin.
Now let's move on to a Trump 2.0 update. Following the LA riots, Trump's approval rating has soared 30 points with existing legal immigrants. He's at about 60% with Hispanics overall. The Democratic Party is getting closer to a fringe party controlled by its core of violent extremists and avowed anti-Semites and Israel haters. In a just released Quinnipiac poll of Democrats, get this, only 12% say their sympathies lie with Israel, compared to 60% who said their sympathies lie with the Palestinians, while 29% said that they just didn't know. This means that the views of such impressive Democratic voices, such as John Fetterman and Richie Torres, both of whom would be excellent presidential choices, these voices are now being shut down. During the preceding half-decade, the Biden agenda, driven by auto pen and auto anesthesia, allowed Jew hatred and anti-Israel agitation to flourish with funding, empowerment, and calculated passivity, as well as willful blindness. This growing core of Jew hatred has metastasized at the edges. And what have we seen? The ruthless murder of 2 young Israeli staffers on the street of Washington, the ghastly firebombing of elderly Jews marching peacefully on the streets of Boulder. Yes, a year of planning by that Egyptian terrorist. And now we have Mohammed Shahzeb Khan extradited a day ago from Canada for his plan to mass murder Jews with automatic rifles in their neighborhoods on the streets of New York. Face it, today we're all targets right here in America. I am a target. You are targets. And what are we going to do about it? I say polish up your mezuzahs, wear your Magen David bravely, and show up and stand up. Do you dare to tremble when my mother and so many other mothers jumped from a Nazi train rumbling toward a death camp, and so many great-grandmothers stood against Ukrainian, Russian, and Baghdadi killers slicing up Jews for sport, when so many of our ancestors in every generation had to flee. But today, we don't have to flee. We can fight. Item 2. You will recall that last week I declared a cherem against Canada. That's a complete ban and boycott, a cherem against Canada for its unstoppable surge of violence. I asked everyone to cancel your Canadian travel and vacations, stop buying Canadian products, and commence a campaign of sanction and isolation against Canada until that increasingly Nazified government remedies the day-to-day violence against Jews. This week, the Ottawa Holocaust Museum was spray painted with graffiti. The situation worsens every day according to Canadian Jews. Just yesterday, the Toronto Star published a poll indicating that 49% of Canadians, get this, 49% of all Canadians, coast to coast, believe Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. A complete farcification of fact and reality. Now, it's not only the thugs of the Arab street and their youthful idiot running partners, now the mechanisms of Canadian government are being screwed against the Jewish community. Canadian prosecutors have launched war crime investigations against Canadian Jews who serve in the Israeli army. Yet I seem to remember many Canadians volunteering for the RAF when England was fighting Hitler. Additionally, last week, the Jewish National Fund lost its final appeal to continue existing in Canada as a registered tax-exempt charity. This is the Jewish National Fund, which built its base on the nickels, dimes, and spare change dropped into blue boxes in Jewish stores, schools, and synagogues, thus enabling Jews to plant trees in swamplands and make the desert bloom. I still have the one I kept for my daughter. Increasingly, Jews in Canada are threatened with prosecution for violating so-called Palestinian hate laws, for saying and writing true facts about the Israeli-Arab conflict. The new Nakba law, now being readied for a vote, will federally outlaw denying the Nakba. That's the Nakba. That is the failed attempt in 1948 to exterminate the Jews, which allowed Israel independence to flourish. Now, a new law is being enacted for Arab Heritage Month. And what month would that be? Well, that would be April, the Passover period. So I wonder if the Passover story about the plagues against the Pharaohic Egyptians will be criminalized, as it was in Iraq when just holding a Hebrew prayer book was considered criminal. I repeat the words of the Montreal Jewish Community Council to the Canadian government, published just a few weeks ago. Quote, since October 7th, the Jewish community of Montreal has faced an unprecedented surge in anti-Semitic hate crimes. Synagogues have been firebombed. I'm still quoting. Jewish day schools have been attacked. Our institutions have been defaced. Our families intimidated. Our children made to feel unsafe in their own city. The rise in hostility has been sharp, visible, and traumatic. Close quote. I advise everyone to watch my last episode on YouTube entitled Farhood Day, Coming to Canada. Yes, our beloved neighbor to the north, Canada, must be cracked before it dispossesses its Jews. Boycott everything Canadian that you can. Item 3, now to Iran. By the time you see this episode, edited in just a few weeks with music and imagery, it's likely that a gargantuan 3-week series of military strikes against Iran will be winding up. Where are we now this moment? The International Atomic Energy Agency has finally unanimously voted that Iran is in violation of its nuclear protocols and obligations. In response, Iran is rushing in homegrown IR-6 centrifuges to its Fordow site, and these are much faster and much more reliable devices for enrichment. And it's now also rushing to open a third enrichment center and threatening to withdraw from the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty altogether. At the same time, Trump is making clear that Iran is out of time, and he won't accept anything less than total dismantlement and zero enrichment. Remember, Iran perfected the warhead long ago. I described it in detail in my Times of Israel exclusive. It's an R-265 shock generator machined into 2 hemispheres laced with 5mm surface channels filled with PETN that will then be exploded in a precision implosion against an exploding bridge wire fuse, which will transduce that powerful charge into a neutron initiator, triggering a single neutron shot into an unstable core of 90% highly enriched uranium, that's HEU, that has been metallized into a spheroid core that can be placed in the nose cone of a Shahab-3 missile, and by now they're testing other more capable missiles, and this warhead is configured to detonate at 550 meters above the ground to create the mushroom cloud and the death of everyone, perhaps 1 million people, within 8 to 10 miles of ground zero. Iran has 5 and perhaps 6 of these unassembled and not yet complete bombs. And the Pentagon just yesterday confirmed to the House Armed Forces Committee that Iran is now rushing day and night, 24/7, to complete the final steps of nuclear weaponization. As of this minute, CENTCOM confirms to the president that they have given several action plans for an attack. The IDF is on a 5-hour readiness. So while Oman this Sunday is serving fizzy water to negotiators, the U.S. is moving our pieces into place, evacuating Americans and American installations, and Israel continues to train. 20,000 U.S. anti-drone missiles were just diverted from Ukraine to Israel in anticipation of Iranian drone swarms launched from cargo and oil freighters, partially or fully weaponized, such as the Bashad, the Makran, and the Shahid Rudaki, which is a $4 million retrofitted combat oil tanker. The work of the IDF's Third Circle Directorate has been absorbed by Israel's General Command. The Third Circle Directorate was the group that was in charge of planning and executing the Iranian attack. So, they're ready. Israel's developed and stockpiled a massive array of bunker-busting missiles, including the Popeye, the Delilah, the hypersonic impossible to predict Rampage, and the Iron Beam laser array has been deployed already now against Hezbollah for weeks. The Israeli IDF confirms that. Plus, Israel has a tall stack of additional surprises. Jerusalem has already notified Beirut that if Hezbollah participates in Iran's expected retaliation, Lebanon will be leveled. More details cannot be revealed by me or my guests, and I remind everyone that this will not be a surgical strike if it happens, that's if, but an intense series of devastating military actions that will span 1 to 3 weeks. It'll take that long to play out. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in tense times that must be measured in hours and days, not days and weeks. Now to our main topic, the Turkish threat. While every day the media and our elected leaders talk about the Iran nuclear threat, the Chinese threat, and the North Korean threat, the experts know there are major threats coming from other nations and epicenters, and leading among those is Turkey. So let's talk Turkey. All scholars and most informed people know that the country we recognize today as Turkey is a somewhat recent invention. For roughly 400 years, the Asian steppe Turkic peoples ruled the Islamic Ottoman Empire, which waged almost continuous war and devastating conquest on 3 continents. For centuries, this empire included the Middle East, and that means Palestine. That is the land of Judah, renamed by the Romans for the Greek island invaders, the Plishtim, that became known as the Philistines, a term today transliterated into Palestinians. And all of this was done for an entirely new group of invaders, those from the Arabian Peninsula. The Ottomans were known for monstrous genocides in many lands. There are too many massacres and genocides to name, but as I've studied and written about Ottoman history in several books, including Banking on Baghdad and my forthcoming Ottoman lands, several of the worst come to mind. We can start with the fall of Constantinople in 1453, when about 4,000 men, women, and children were massacred within days, the churches destroyed, and as many as 30,000 taken as slaves. Massacres of Greek and Lebanese Christians occurred on a regular basis. In 1876, the oppressed Bulgarian people revolted, and a series of monstrous massacres, expulsions, and ethnic cleansings occurred. In the village of Batak, for example, after just a 5-day siege, some 5,000 innocents were slaughtered. Historians and contemporary records estimate the total killed in a short period of time approached perhaps 30,000 people, and this caused the British Prime Minister to name this sequence of atrocities the Bulgarian Horrors, or the Bulgarian Atrocities. Indeed, it gave rise to the term the Terrible Turk. All these massacres were to tame local non-Islamic populations so they could be taxed and taxed again. And all of this supported whichever sultan was in power, as they lived in inestimable luxury in their palaces and with their harems populated by kidnapped slave women. In fact, the sultan's successors lived in the harem until adulthood, or if their father died, and this spurred horrific fratricide, with the surviving son ascending to the throne. The sultan could not be overruled and fundamentally exerted a form of sovereignty over all private property. In 1858, a great reformer, Midhat Pasha, passed the Ottoman Land Registration Act, which governed all colonies and all countries, including Palestine. It allowed local people to purchase and register their land, but almost no one wanted to register their land because then they would be assessed huge taxes and their sons would be drafted into the hated army. This was especially the case in Palestine and Arab lands. In this impossible to sustain empire, which thrived on war, luxury, and sexual exploitation, and endless financial loans to sustain it all, the Ottoman Empire went bankrupt. The Ottoman Debt Commission, controlled by the Bank of England, actually controlled the government during the last decades of the 19th century. All this spawned the popular Eastern question and the nickname for the Ottomans, the quote, the sick man of Europe, where diplomats would theorize just when the Ottomans would collapse and what would become of their colonies in Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Then came World War I, when the Turks sided with the Germans. During that war, the Turks committed their worst genocide, the elaborate, organized, systematic extermination of some 1.4 million Armenians. You may remember that Hitler said early in his career, "Who will remember the Armenians?" Germany and Turkey lost World War I, and they both lost their colonies, especially the backwater Ottoman colonies in the Middle East, including Palestine. This is when the corrupt Petro-Political League of Nations invented numerous modern Arab nations out of tribal realms in the region, and this included Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Hijaz, Jordan, plus one Jewish nation called Israel. And all this based on universally applauded notions of self-determination and nationalism. The empire was reduced to just what we know today, Turkey. By 1923, the rebellious fighting in this smaller country called Turkey became official, and the Turks themselves accepted it. Since World War I, Turkey has modernized, industrialized, and assumed new military and diplomatic stature in the world as the #1 European army in NATO, an industrial powerhouse wedding East and West Eurasia, and in recent years its volatile and unpredictable Islamist President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan has made two things clear. One, he wants to restore the Ottoman Empire, and he actually used a Hitler rationale to do it, Lebensraum, stating that Turks needed more room. It was just last September when Erdogan told Arab media that Turkey cannot be confined to its borders. Quote from Erdogan, "We will be in a much better place in the future. Turkey is not just a place confined in an area of 782,000 square kilometers." Close quote. In its quest to achieve re-imperialization, Turkey made common cause with ISIS. Most recruits couldn't really travel to ISIS regions without going through Turkey. ISIS crude oil was transported and sold through Turkey with the facilitation of official Turkish petroleum channels. At the same time, Turkey allied to Putin's Russia, going after the S-400 air defense system while it was a NATO leader, and has been therefore denied the American F-35. At the same time, Turkey and Erdogan hates Israel, openly allies with Hamas, and wants to see Israel disappear. This year, Turkey's alliance with ISIS elements evolved into the overnight overthrow of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad at the hand of ISIS 3.0 forces led by the man now installed as Syria's leader, Ahmed al-Sharaa, himself an ISIS 3.0 strongman from the al-Nusra terrorist organization. We are now told that al-Sharaa has reformed. He wears a nice suit. He sports a $70,000 gold wristwatch and has made genuine progress evicting Iranian forces and even making clear peace moves with Israel, even while his forces are still exterminating Druze and Christian villagers. In the process, Turkey signed a mutual military pact with the new Syria, took over Syria's pivotal T4 air base, and is now in a position to deliver on its promises to destroy Israel and retake the Holy Land. If Israel and Turkey tumble into a military clash, it means war with NATO, even though Turkey must be expelled from NATO for NATO to regain its stature, since its lead European forces openly declares it wants to conquer more lands on other continents and destroy and evict Israel while in league with Russia, Iran, and China. This is an extremely volatile situation where one wrong move could trigger a war at a time when Israel is preparing to assault Iran, has given rise to deconfliction talks between Israel and Turkey, now hosted by Baku, once a Turkish territory. This is the stuff that keeps the smart people up late at night. There's a lot more to the story, and we can only cover a fraction of it here, but we start with a further contribution by one of the best minds on the planet, with a PhD in Ottoman history and much time spent understanding the Turkish mindset, a one-time Turkish affairs expert at the Pentagon. I give you the man the experts call when they need an expert. I give you Harold Rhode, and take the camera, Harold.
Thank you very much, Edwin. I think just in a general sense, there are many things we could say about what's going on with Turkey and Erdoğan. And I just want a cultural thing, which I think is extremely important. Under Islam, the Jews and Christians have a right to live because they had a revelation from God before Islam, but only if they know their place, which means they cannot rule. Only Muslims can rule. Now, the young people in Turkey, which under Erdoğan, he pushed the Lord that they should have this Muslim view of the world. All of us Muslims are brothers. And what Israel did from their point of view was, from Erdoğan's point of view, is take Muslim land. What is the definition of Muslim land? Any land ever conquered by Islam must remain Muslim forever. So that's the Erdoğan view. Now, what is interesting is it's not just religion that matters, it's Islamic culture. Why is this important? There are a lot of young people in Turkey who are fed up with Erdoğan. And they say, and not only that, they say, we are no longer Muslims. To leave Islam, by the way, the punishment is death. But young people have been saying this sort of thing. Now, these people have, put it this way, we're taught to basically, shall we say, hate Israel from a Muslim religious point of view. That's Erdoğan's view. But what is interesting is these young ex-Muslims, as they would call themselves, they call themselves theists. They believe in God, but not in Islam. Those young people still hate Israel. Now, how is this, or why is this? You'd think that if they want to give up, if they loathe Erdoğan, the dictator, the ruler, the leader, in Turkish lider is not a good thing to say. It means a despot. And you'd think that if they hate Erdoğan so much, that they would therefore hate his views vis-a-vis, for example, Israel. But no, the vast majority of these young theists in Turkey, non-Muslim theists believing in God, they still hate Israel. Now, their question is why? And my argument look, I'm 76 years old. First time I was in Turkey was when I was 18. And I've studied and traveled and got lost in the country over the years and everything on purpose, just to try to understand the mentality. And Islamic culture permeates everything. It's not just religion. It's not how you pray. It's not do you fast. It's not do you go to Mecca. It is that everything is Islam. And Jews by definition are inferior. So are Christians inferior. Edwin, you talked about the massacres of Christians in the late 19th century or early 20th century. If you talk with any Christians who come from there, as long as they're not living in Turkey with no relatives left there, they will tell you what they think. And they will say they hate us because we are non-Muslims. We are Christians. Christians and Jews are the same. And that's it. So when it comes to the young people, which is the future of the country, it's clear that before they, shall we say, they hated Israel for religious reasons. Now they hate it because, it's imperialist, it's murdering fellow Muslims. They don't say it. They'll say the Palestinians or whatever the case may be. What remains the same is that they hate Israel and the Jews.
Well, that is such a meaningful insight, Harold. What we're talking here is, you haven't used the word, but it's applicable, the concept of dimitude, which
yes.
comes from the Pact of Umar, which says that they can be citizens, but they're second-class and third-class citizens, just as you said. So,
Edwin, they cannot rule is the bottom line. Only Muslims can rule a land which was ever conquered by Islam.
And that comment by you explains the entire Palestinian, Jewish, Israeli conflict. They cannot agree to sovereignty on the other side of the fence because of what you just said. Absolutely.
It's true. Yes. Unfortunately, it's true. But it's a fact.
So how would this play out in Erdogan's notion of Lebensraum? Do you think it's actually possible that these guys will emulate the Young Turks of 1908, want to create this extended national identity? Is it possible that they would try to regain their colonies?
You've actually come up with something very interesting. Yes, Erdoğan, you talked about Ahmed Shara and or Jolani, the guy whom they trained, the militia whom they trained. And it doesn't matter whether he's an Islamic fundamentalist in a suit, as you said, you're absolutely right. But here's the thing that they have to deal with right now in Turkey with Erdoğan. There is a battle. The Ottoman Empire, based in Istanbul or Constantinople in the past, was a big empire, and the Arabs were included in it. But in Damascus, which is where Shara is, they have a different tradition. They don't want to be ruled by Istanbul. They want to be in what is called a reestablishment of the Umayyad Empire. What is the Umayyad Empire? After their prophet died, the word caliph, Khalifa in Arabic, which means those who come in place of. If people know Hebrew, there is the word litchalef, to change. The same roots, Arabic and Hebrew, are very, very closely related language. Then the first serious Muslim dynasty was established in the year 661 in Damascus. And that is the real first capital of Islam, not Istanbul. It's not the Turks. It's we Muslims, we Arabs that matter here, not the Turks. Now, how they're going to work that out is a little beyond me, but it gets even more interesting. If you notice that Shara, who was originally, of course, backed and armed by Turkey, by Erdoğan, let's not even call it Turkey, by Erdoğan, because there are many people who loathe Erdoğan in Turkey. They're just afraid to open their mouths too much because they will be carted off. Anyway, there's another fight. It's between Turkey and Qatar on one side, which is basically the Muslim Brotherhood. Erdoğan is a major figure in the Muslim Brotherhood. You say, well, how do I know he's a member? They don't have membership cards. It's supporting an idea. Qatar is the same thing. They had all sorts of major, the Muslim Brotherhood leaders, which they propagated through Al Jazeera. And the Al Jazeera in Arabic, if anybody is listening, in English and Arabic, they're completely different stations. The vitriol that they promulgate in Muslim languages, in Arabic, in Turkish, and whatever is unbelievable. Now, the Saudis, yes, at one time it's true they supported the Muslim Brotherhood, but the Muslim Brotherhood, after a deal, basically tried to take over. And so the Saudis, for their own reasons, they may not like Israel because it's Muslim territory, but their intellectual godfather, who was a man who lived in the 1200s and 1300s, a guy named Ibn Taymiyyah, hated Jerusalem. And let's just say there are many in Saudi Arabia who go out of their way to talk about the real Al-Aqsa Mosque is not in Jerusalem, but it's about 30 kilometers from Mecca.
Now we're getting into some other fascinating stuff, and you and I will get together again.
Edwin, the only reason I'm saying is you cannot isolate the whole Turkish thing. You have to see it in a Muslim context and what is going on. And let me please just say one more thing. You have the Gulfies, that is the UAE, Bahrain, and a few others who hate what they call Islamic extremism because they think it will destroy them. That includes the Saudis, of all people, on one side versus Qatar and Erdogan on the other. And Qatar get along beautifully. They're two peas in a pod. That's the thing we should be watching. Initial thing they're trying to work on here is how do we deal with Syria? Erdogan wants what you described in the beginning, Edwin. It's to expand the Ottoman Empire, and that's, Lebensraum, as you said. They expand down there. On the other hand, the Saudis and the Gulfies have tons of money, and they're trying to tempt, if you wish, the Shah, the guy who is now running Damascus, the people that the West has appointed as the leader of Syria, which is the Sunnis simply taking over and killing a lot of non-Sunnis in Syria and in other places. The place is a mess, and if we were smart here in the West, and we could be a little smarter at times, let's say, we would say to ourselves, these disagreements between each other, we should just watch as they're handling each other and stay out of it and only worry about our interests.
Oh, very well.
That's it.
And so listen, folks, these are sage words, and we'll have Harold back another time. He's going to stick around a little bit for the QA session. I want to bring in now one of our best sources on military threats in the Middle East. I bring you contributing editor Clare Lopez in Virginia. Clare, how tense is it now, and how tense can it get with Turkey controlling large sections of Syria as a sort of a quasi-satellite, especially just on the other side of the Golan Heights? Take it, Clare.
Well, thank you, Edwin. And I realize we've only got 15 minutes left in this hour, so I'll speak quickly here. But let me begin by showing you a book that Harold will recognize, Ally No More, Erdogan's New Turkish Caliphate and the Rising Jihadist Threat to the West, a book that I edited and co-authored, and the first chapter in the book was written by Harold Rhode.
Thank you.
And this book came out back in 2018. Each chapter in it is by a different author. I've put the link to the book in the chat if you'd be interested in following up. It's available at Amazon. But let me, because you both, Edwin and Harold, you both covered really well the Ottoman era of Turkey, as well as more recent developments in a kinetic kind of a jihad sense. And so very quickly, what I'll say first is that I think many of us would echo your sentiments and agree. If only after World War II and the establishment of the NATO treaty, there had been inserted into that treaty some provision for downgrading or evicting a member. But alas, that treaty does not have any such provision. And so there's no way to kick Turkey out. The only thing that could be done were it to come to that would be to restrict the exchange of information, of intelligence with Turkey and other NATO members. And of course, as I think it was you, Edwin, who mentioned that the proposed sale of our US F-35 fighter jets to Turkey has been put on ice because of their acquisition or impending maybe, acquisition of the Russian S-400 air defense system. Those are the things that can be done. Ejection out of NATO is not one of them. So let me turn to an aspect of the jihad, Turkey's jihad, led by President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan against the West, and in particular, I will focus on the United States, although your references to the region are absolutely important as well. But what I want to talk about is the non-kinetic jihad led by, again, Erdoğan and his neo-Ottoman regime there in Turkey. I don't know if folks know this, but the headquarters of the Turkish regime in America, yes, they have an embassy, but I don't mean the embassy or any consulates either. I mean the Diyanet Center of America. Diyanet is a cabinet-level department of the Turkish government, and it is established for the management of religious affairs. The Diyanet Center of America is located on a 16-acre compound about a dozen miles north of our capital in Washington, D.C. It is located in Maryland. And that is a very strategic location because not very far away from there is the East Coast headquarters of the Muslim Brotherhood. Well, there's a very close relationship between these facilities. The Turkish Diyanet Center of America, a Muslim Brotherhood Turkish headquarters, and the Muslim Brotherhood Center in the United States, East Coast at least. Also, I want to expand this because what is Turkey doing? What is its Muslim Brotherhood connections in the United States? What are they doing on our streets, on our campuses? This is extremely important. There is an organization in the United States, which is the political umbrella group of the Muslim Brotherhood in America. It is called the USCMO, apologies, another acronym, United States Council of Muslim Organizations. It has many front groups in it, but among them I will name the AMP, American Muslims for Palestine, which is a founding member of the USCMO. And the AMP was founded by a lecturer out, well, you guessed it, Berkeley, California, Hatim Bazian. And they have a very close relationship with the Turkish AKP, which is the Turkish acronym for Justice and Development Party. Anytime you see that combination, that's a Muslim Brotherhood party. AKP and AMP are BFFs. One more, and that is the campus branch of the AMP is called the SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, also founded by the same guy, the lecturer Bazian, out in California. And so I wrote an article not that long ago. It appeared at American Great List. You can look it up. It's called, Will the Trump Administration Follow the Anti-Semitism Trail Wherever It Leads? It came out mid-May, 15 May, about 2-3 weeks ago. And the point there is that I would like Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, our FBI, certainly, Kash Patel, Director, Deputy Dan Bongino, and another excellent leader. His name is Leo Terrell, and he heads up a task force for the Department of Justice to pursue anti-Semitism, in particular on the campuses. Another Department of Justice joint task force is the Joint Task Force that's abbreviated JTF 10-7. October 7, 2023.
You've done a great job with abbreviations and acronyms and also giving us a huge insight into the Turkish threat, not only as it functions in the Middle East, but as it functions right here at home. You've done a great job. Now, I'm not going to address your NATO comment because we have so many questions about how to kick Turkey out of NATO that I'm going to answer them right after Yaakov Lappin joins us, which is in just a moment. And I agree with you, it's going to be hard if it happens at all. So stick around and thank you very much. I have more comments for you, Claire. But joining us now is one of the most knowledgeable of military journalists who covers the unfolding minute-to-minute events in the Mideast region, I-24 and JNS military correspondent Yaakov Lappin. Yaakov, thanks for breaking away from your studio duties. So with Israel action against Iran imminent, what can you tell us about the deconfliction talks in Baku between Israel and Turkey, especially as Syrian flight paths might be a real-time issue? Take the camera, Yaakov.
Hi, great to be with you, Edwin. We know that the talks happened. We know that the United States and Azerbaijan wanted these talks to happen, but the actual long-term effects of these talks are not at all clear because very soon after they occurred, we received reports that Turkey was planning on building air bases bases for its ground forces and naval bases in parts of Syria. Now, that's exactly the kind of presence that Israel has signaled would constitute a breach of its red lines. And before these talks occurred, we know that Israel bombed bases in central Syria, in the central Syrian desert. One of them was well known, the T4 base. Some of these bases were used by Iran when it was the main power holder in Syria and setting up proxies. And now it's out of the picture. Turkey would like to fill that role now as the Sunni Islamist power in Syria. And so deconfliction talks, I think, can only be judged in the long run. They cannot be judged in the short run because Turkey has ambitions. It wants to set up a direct military presence in Syria. There's no doubt that that's its intention. Perhaps it's tactically, pragmatically willing to pull back now in order to avoid a clash with the Trump administration. But this has to be watched very closely. And on top of that, Turkey has proxies in northern Syria. They're members of the SNA, a Syrian National Army umbrella group. Many of these groups are radical Islamist and jihadist groups. And Israel has made it very clear that it will not tolerate the movement of any of these forces south of Damascus. So at the end of the day, I think that Turkey remains a threat to Israel's security in Syria, but perhaps the threat has been put on temporary hold as part of Turkey's balancing act, but that doesn't mean that it's gone away.
Are the ISIS fighters who are held in these prisons guarded by the Syrian Democratic Forces, that's a different group, are they still in prison or have they been released?
But to the best of my knowledge, they're still in prison. There is concern about, where that's going because the SDF is facing pressure from Turkey and from the Syrian regime. So, we know that they've signed an agreement with the Syrian regime and they're supposed to somehow integrate into the al-Shara regime. We don't know how that's going to play out. We have to remember, that there's a big gap between all of these announcements about the agreements that the al-Shara regime is signing with all these various groups and the reality on the ground. The reality on the ground is that this is a brand new regime. It was born out of chaos. It doesn't have full control of its own forces as of now. So the fate of those prisons or sites holding thousands of very dangerous and radical ISIS jihadists, as of now, they're still in there, but we don't know where that's going.
And that would include these two camps, at least two that are holding the women and children.
Yes.
The young lions and the lion cubs and all those guys. Now, listen, do you think that in the days to come, when there may, we're not sure, be an Israeli assault against Iran, do you think that there's a potential for a deconfliction issue with Turkey in the coming days, should this attack, which everyone is talking about, should that come to the fore?
Should the attack materialize, I don't think Turkey is going to be any sort of significant factor in this attack. In fact, Turkey as a Sunni Islamist power, and which wants under Erdoğan to become a neo-Ottoman presence in the Middle East, I don't actually think it would mind very much to see its rival, Shiite Iran, and what's left of its axis attacked. I don't think that Turkey would cry many tears, maybe some crocodile tears publicly, but I don't think that this would be considered a huge problem for Turkey privately behind closed doors. They see them as a rival. And, just as we in Israel sometimes see the Sunni radicals and the Shiite radicals, when they don't cooperate against us, they sometimes clash. I'm not sure that Turkey would have a huge problem with Iran being hit and Iran's nuclear program.
All right, especially since Turkey is completely Sunni and Iran is completely Shia. Now, why don't you stick around for a couple of 3 minutes? And we've got some questions here. We got a lot of them, but we only have a little bit of time. The number one question that everybody wants to know is, and this is Harvey in Tampa wants to know this, Christine in Indiana wants to know this, and for all intents and purposes, Claire in Virginia wants to know this. Can Turkey be thrown out of NATO? So the answer is we're not sure. So I have scrutinized the NATO treaty, and there is no mechanism to eject a partner. But there is Article 13, and Article 13 gives a pathway for a country to exit NATO. And I'm thinking that Article 13, and I've consulted with some international lawyers and some NATO emissaries, that Article 13, if it could be ishkabibbled and pretzeled, and I think only Harold knows what ishkabibbled means on this show, but if it could be pretzeled and turned into a proper mechanism, they could get Turkey out of NATO. But the whole idea of throwing Turkey out of NATO will throw the entire alliance out. And of course, who knows what Turkey would do next? How is it possible for NATO, which is supposed to be a peacekeeping treaty, to ally itself with Russia on the other side, S-400, and to proclaim its desire to hegemonize the Ottoman Empire back? Go, Yaakov.
Yeah, Edwin, just to add to what you were saying, one of the things that always amazes me is that Turkey is the home, it hosts Hamas operational headquarters. In other words, Hamas terrorists, many of them who were released in the 2010 Gilad Shalit exchange, these are some of the most dangerous jihadist terrorists that Hamas has produced, are over there in Turkey, essentially coordinating and promoting terrorism in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. And so they're hosting terrorism in much the same way that, Afghanistan was a host to Al-Qaeda, but even more so because this is done by a strong centralized government that is absolutely pro-Hamas in every way, publicly and materially. And it still gets to be in NATO. There are no ramifications for this terrorist backing as an official government policy. So that always amazes me from an Israeli perspective. And, if anybody has any doubt about what Erdogan's intentions are, again, he hosts a Hamas operational headquarters, whose job it is every day to coordinate and export terrorism in the West Bank. I don't know. That seems to speak for itself, as far as I can tell.
Well, you've got the hosting of Hamas here and the hosting of the NATO base at Incirlik here.
Right.
So he's got the best of both worlds. I want to
Right.
hear from Harold. Harold, is there any possibility that NATO could somehow get its act together and separate itself from Turkey, especially since Turkey didn't rise to the occasion when the Houthis hit American ships? Chapter 5, attack against one, attack against all. Harold Rhode.
I don't know the answer to that question. The United States, when you join America and a state joins America, there's no way out. Same story. I don't know how this can be finagled. I just don't have an answer. I'm sorry.
Claire, you've studied the NATO treaty. Any chance that Article 13 could be used upside down and inside out to get Turkey out of the alliance?
I don't think so. But what I said before, I think, is the only way to do it, and that is to sort of ice them out, to hold back from intelligence and other information that would be shared among other NATO members and held back from Turkey.
So, in other words, hold back cooperation the way they're holding back the F-35.
In that way, yes.
Okay. Second question here from the watch party in the villages. Who was Abdul the Damned? Let's see, Abdul the Damned. It's funny, but when I had one of my Turkish books published, the publisher said, we're not going to change anything in your book, which was, I believe it was this one, Banking on Baghdad. We're not going to change anything, but please, we cannot refer to Abdul Hamid as Abdul the Damned. It was Abdul Hamid II, and he was in charge of many, many massacres, and became known as Abdul the
Sultan.
He was a sultan, of course, of Pashas in charge. He was also known as the Red Sultan, and he's got buck teeth. And so that's Abdul the Damned. Thank you, watch party. And we have too many questions to continue, and we're just about out of time. So I want to say we are out of time. Hold for my closing word of wisdom, just 2 minutes away. But first, I want to thank my extremely knowledgeable guests. I mean here, Harold Rhode and experts, Clare Lopez and Yaakov Lappin. And also I thank my talented international team, including Nick in London, Christine in Indiana, Richard in the Philippines, as well as many others in numerous additional cities around the world. I'll see everyone back here in 2 weeks at 3 p.m. Eastern. You want to be a friend of the Edwin Black Show? Go to theedwinblackshow.com/support. Keep me independent. If you want to hear me in person, watch my website for events, consult my events page at edwinblack.com. Until then, head over to any Barnes & Noble in the USA or any Amazon, Walmart, iTunes Books, Google Books, Kobo, or Audible.com platform in 190 countries in this roiling, toiling, boiling planet, where you can find any of my 250 book editions, such as IBM and the Holocaust and Banking on Baghdad. You want an autographed copy? Hit edwinblack.com and click books. Get access alerts to participate live in future shows at theedwinblackshow.com. You'll see a much enhanced and exquisitely produced version of this show and prior episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channel at The Edwin Black Show. Click the notification button like tens of thousands of others have. Follow me at Edwin Black Book on X, as well as that Facebook thing. And now for my closing word of wisdom. Before you do it, ask, is it worth it? I'm zooming out from our nation's capital. Bless all of you and pray for all that is unfolding before our very eyes.